Well, it's been a while since I've had Frodan in the studio with me, but today he's returned. Actually, our new studio, you haven't been in here, I think.
Yeah, it's all fancy. I love some of the pictures. You guys have some great art in the background.
Yeah, I actually drew this all myself.
Oh, you're very talented.
Yeah.
Are you sure you picked the right career choice, Travis?
MS Paint, yeah, I'll just pull it up. I don't know. This is a hobby for me, but my passion is actually interviewing Hearthstone commentators and personalities.
Well, you got the right one.
Okay, very, very good. Well, either way, let's talk a little bit about Hearthstone. Kind of an interesting place. So we've had Mean Streets of Kazakhstan out for a while. The meta's kind of stabilized. What are we kind of seeing as the big topics of conversation in the community right now?
Well, I think some of the biggest pressing issues right now with the expansion is the oppression of a few over the masses. Specifically, we're looking at the pirate package and how it's dominating all forms of play, whether you are in competitive or even just casually on the ladder. The pirate package goes in almost everything these days. You can play it in a very aggressive deck. Obviously, you play, the small-time Buccaneer and patches, get bored early, kill your opponent. You can also play it in combo decks. You see Miracle Rogue needs to be competitive early on the board so they don't die. So they're also playing patches. And then you have control decks even putting it in, so that way they stabilize early on. And it turns out, if you have an early game start with the pirates, you also can just win without needing to control the board so much in the mid stages of the game. But on the other side, there's also a very dominant Reno-style deck. That's what we like to call it. It's a Highlander format from Magic the Gathering. If you have Kazakis and Reno Jackson and some of these other really powerful one-ofs in the deck, then you also can just win the game on the spot. So what people don't really like about it is that it feels like you have to play either one of these two archetypes or else you're just not going to be competitive. Whether or not that notion is true, it doesn't really matter as much as how popular it is. Because even if you can play other things like a Jade-style deck or a Control Warrior, it doesn't feel like it's as effective as those other two strategies.
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that naturally how things go? Like, people think something's OP, and then eventually people start to realize like a counter to it, and then everybody suddenly thinks that's OP. I mean, is this not the just like continuing cycle of life for a card game?
It's true. It does feel like there's always going to be a dominant tier 1 strategy, but part of what Hearthstone really pushes out is the fact that there's 9 classes. In tournament play, you try to put at least 4 classes with a ban, so there's supposed to be diversity and a whole point of a wheel kind of self-countering itself, so that way there's a rock, paper, scissors with whatever kind of elements you want. And it's really lacking that right now. It really feels like rock and paper, and they just, well, that's a really bad example because not exactly one counters the other. But right now it just feels, for lack of a better term, it feels like you're coin flipping because you try to bring one kind of lineup that counters the other. And this carries over to tournament play. But at the same time, I do feel like tournament diversity in the decks is very interesting. Ironically enough, it's one of those metas where I think the tournaments are much more engaging than the ladder play. And that's because right now, Reno decks are so diversified with how they prepare. You have to pick 30 individual cards, and a lot of people debate on what cards are good or not. There's so many varied opinions. So tournament preparation is really fun from a player's perspective. I got to play in a major last weekend, and preparing for that was one of the most fun I've ever had playing in a tournament.
And that's just because, so to clarify, it's fun because you get to prep and figure out like what you can do with this type of deck, but still there's only like one type of deck that most people are playing?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's an evolution of strategies, and the tournament meta actually has a lot of control. A lot of the time, the criticism against Hearthstone is they feel like aggressive strategies will always be the dominant thing, but I do feel like there's a lot of good control decks right now. The only problem is that it feels like they're playing the same core package, and so the exposure level to the same cards over and over really does feel like it's wearing you down, and it feels like you're playing against the same thing, even though they are kind of diversified if you look at the entire package.
Yeah. Now, has Blizzard commented on any of this? Do they sort of see this? I'm sure they tend to talk whenever people think something's super OP.
Yeah, well, Blizzard has definitely acknowledged the problem, which I think actually has caused even more unrest in the community because they feel like, well, they know, or they say they know that there's a problem, but they're not doing anything about it. And it's been about a couple weeks since they even did a live-streamed Q&A with the community and said, the very famous meme within our community now, it's on our radar.
Yeah.
And I think right now Blizzard's caught between a crossroads because the new expansion and the rotation is slotted to come out in just a couple of months. do they take action now when the game's going to change anyways, potentially turning off people? Say if they do nerf the package with small-time Buccaneer, say they do nerf Reno, Jackson, or Kazakis, but then what happens when standard rotation comes out? Is that going to, once again, inevitably shake things up too much? And then you're not able to really adjust to it if you're a player that plays kind of casually. And we do have to keep in mind that that's kind of how Blizzard targets stuff. Even though guys like me, guys like you are even considered hardcore because you play regularly, people who play maybe once a week, once a month, those are the players that Blizzard really cares about as well, and they don't want to leave them behind.
Yeah. It's an interesting challenge for them. I mean, I also think even stepping away from the game, I know so many people were upset whenever Blizzard wasn't communicating, and they said, like the Hearthstone fans were saying, why aren't they more like the Overwatch team and how much they communicate? Now it feels like they've communicated by saying, like, guys, we know there's a problem. We need to figure out how to fix it. We don't have a solution yet. And now people are upset that there's not like a solution that they have in hand, right?
Yeah, the problem right now with Blizzard communication is that it feels like they're just like us. They're identifying the problems, but not coming up with a solution. And I feel like right now we're at a crossroads. We're at a deep crossroads within the community where a lot of the hardcore players, they're leaving. They feel like a lot of the Hearthstone right now has so much potential, but it's just not really meeting it for what they want. But then at the same time, the casuals feel like the hardcore dictates too much of their gameplay experience as well. The hardcore people are the ones coming with all these crazy deck lists and really oppressing the casual forms of ladder, dropping all the way down to rank 20. If you start at the beginning of the season at rank 16, you're going to meet some of these aggro shamans, some of these pirate warriors and these Reno warlocks, and it's going to be really hard and daunting to play against if you're a player that just likes grinding through the early starts of the ranks just to get your card back. So right now, Blizzard's trying too hard to balance both ends of the spectrum and appeasing neither, I think.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned, you kind of touched on this, like how the ladder system works. Is there a solution here, or is there some change to the system that they could make that helps appease both of the different groups?
Yeah, so I think right now a lot of people are targeting the ladder experience and saying that one reset every month is too frequent. They feel like a lot of their accomplishments get thrown out the window, and then you get sent all the way back to the depths into rank 16. If you get Legend, that is, you go to rank 16. If you get rank 5, you get sent down even lower, and you have to play, and everything gets consolidated. And part of that starts getting exacerbated when you have to accrue points for the official World Championship in the Legend ranks as well. And so what ends up happening is you encourage people to play very fast decks. So of course they're going to play aggressive Shaman, because even if the aggro Shaman has a lower win rate, which it doesn't, by the way, it's the best deck in the game. But let's say it does have a lower win rate, like 52%, 51%. It's still a better deck to climb with because you're playing more games, so you're likely to get on that streak.
Grind, right?
Yeah, you're able to get that streak going, so that way you can rank up your MMR for the season. And that kind of becomes a vicious cycle. Other people have to play fast decks to keep up with you because you're the one grinding it faster, and people don't really have time to play slow decks. So then that carries over all the way down. People are saying, well, the highest win rate deck is this fast deck because everyone's playing it, and it's more popular, maybe it's good. And then other people start copying that, and then trends start falling down. It always starts with the very competitive, and it trickles all the way down. It's always been a trend that's happening in Hearthstone. I don't think necessarily revamping the entire ladder system through small tweaks is the best change. I personally think that Blizzard needs to separate the Hearthstone World Championship points that you get from ladder into another competitive mode. I think the Heroic Tavern Brawl that came out a couple months ago was a very good success trial run to show that there's a lot of competitive interest. Maybe not for the entire population, but for some of it. And if you're able to have, I don't know, automated tournaments, which Blizzard has historically done in games like Warcraft 3, and you have dedicated times where you let everyone know in client that this is the way you primarily get Hearthstone Championship Tour points, which simulates a tournament experience, because, by the way, ladder is not the same as tournaments, and we know this because we see some ladder players go to tournaments and still perform poorly, but vice versa. It's all a balance. If you're able to get this, then all of a sudden you have a more fulfilling experience. Ladder is not filled with end of the month, last couple hours of grinding and anxiety, and then people watching those people have anxiety on Twitch TV. This kind of really bad cycle that goes on turns the players off from even wanting to play in it. And that kind of makes their fans not like it. And that kind of leads them to posting and complaining about it. And that's what leads to a lot of mass discontent in general. So I personally think having a separate competitive mode will do wonders to revitalize people's interest in competitive play.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring this up because I know Blizzard has been a big advocate of like their fireside gatherings and these kind of ways for people to enter. I used to play the WoW TCG. It was really fun to go to like a local card shop and play on a weekend. The idea of having like a digital version of this that I can play just from home on a Saturday, even if I'm not the type of person that aspires to compete at a BlizzCon or something like that, seems like it would be kind of a cool way to even help the people that aren't at the highest ends of the ladder. So it kind of appeases everybody.
Yeah, I mean, Hearthstone's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness. Its accessibility is a lot of the reason why the offline Hearthstone events don't necessarily get as much turnout. Why bother traveling to PAX South and play in the major if I can get just as many points playing on the ladder myself and not having to spend all that money, hotel, travel for a single elimination, one best of 3 or best of 5, 128-man bracket. It's a very, very poorly structured system right now. But if there's one thing that I'm confident in, because I feel like I'm being very negative here, is that Blizzard right now is paying attention to a lot of those things, and they're trying to fix it. But the thing is that they're very slow in fixing it. So if there's one thing that I feel like Blizzard could improve on, is that right now I feel like they're just afraid to fail. I think they feel like everything's going so well in Hearthstone, and it is. If you realistically look at how much money they made, there's a report that said they made hundreds of millions of dollars last year. That's amazing. Yeah. They did a really good job revitalizing.
At least $1 million of that was from me, I think.
Okay, well, there you go. Me too. I guess most of us contributed to the shareholders' profits there. But they did really well financially, and I think right now they're just so afraid to do something that rocks the boat. And I think that ends up causing analysis paralysis. And I feel like right now, if they continue that trend, it's going to be a downhill trend, because right now I think a lot of people want so much more from the game. Perhaps maybe that's on us. Maybe we looked at something that it shouldn't be. We want Hearthstone to be a lot more than what Blizzard intended to be. But times change and the community is asking for a lot, and historically Blizzard's really accommodated for that, and I hope that doesn't change now.
Yeah. Is there any element of you looking at the stuff that they are talking about doing with Overwatch and this giant Overwatch League and all that stuff, and having a little bit of either frustration or even concern that like maybe there's a new beautiful child that's been born over there that's going to get some attention?
Well, I look at the Overwatch League and I think, man, that's pretty awesome for them. But I really hope that's not the case for Hearthstone. I think part of what makes Hearthstone amazing is that you can play it anywhere. You can play it with anybody. Assuming you have the regional account for it, which still kind of blows my mind too, the whole region locking accounts thing.
Sure.
But I think that it's important for Hearthstone to constantly be able to be on the go. And when you have Hearthstone as a card game, it makes it really powerful to tour the world. We're going to the Bahamas for the Winter Championship.
I mean, you're going.
I hope.
I wish I could go.
I'm going to the Winter Championship. Travis doesn't want to hang.
No, I really want to go, especially after you told me that rumor about something fun that you might end up doing. But either way, I'm really jealous.
No worries. And I think that's beautiful in a way, And who knows? Maybe in the future we can be playing Hearthstone on a cruise to the Bahamas.
Yes.
And I think that kind of stuff's really awesome and really captures the fun aspect of it. Hearthstone's a big what-if world. Overwatch, as you see the league being advertised, is very serious and like, this is who you are, Crusher 99, be the next big star. Hearthstone's kind of like, we're having fun playing card games and there just happens to be a lot of stakes on the line and these players are really smart and there's a lot of like good strategy going on. I think they should keep part of that charm. If we try so hard to be like CS:GO, if we try so hard to be like League of Legends, then we lose our identity without even copying them.
Isn't that kind of leading to like that dichotomy of like, all right, like a lot of people take this seriously, this is their career, this is amazing, but then you're kind of pushing this idea that like it doesn't need to be as serious as Overwatch. Is there a chance that like that kind of mix in ideas is what puts you guys in this position in the first place?
Yeah, it's a really good observation. Probably what I should have said in the very beginning. Hearthstone maybe got this far because it's so different. It's very relaxing. You can always play it on the side. You could be playing it while playing another game. We see a lot of players and streamers do that. And that's kind of what Blizzard did a very good job doing. Yeah. Always making it feel like a game they can come back to, spend a few minutes on, and never really go away from it, while not feeling like you have to commit so much. How many times have you played another game and just feel like if I'm not practicing it, I'm falling behind. I'm not like as fast, or I'm not as up to date in the meta. Hearthstone's a game you can catch up very quickly on if you just go away for a month or two and just get another deck and queue it up. And that's what they've nailed, but that's just a starting point. They need to go even further.
Hey, we have a couple more minutes before we get tossed out of the studio for whatever else is happening
a lot,
here. No, it's good. But I do want to talk to you about the interesting thing that will happen in a couple of months, I guess, is whenever we lose, the new year shuffle occurs. Is there a fancy term for you guys? Yeah, rotation, I guess. So rotation, League of Legends is a very different term. But so obviously that'll happen. It'll have pretty big impacts. Things like Reno will possibly go out. And curious what you think of this idea that's been kind of floating around of reprinting some of these cards and throwing them in standard, and how all that stuff works.
So reprinting in general is not a bad thing. A lot of times you find out that the metagame is very beneficial because it exists. Counterplay cards, for example, are very crucial. Big Game Hunter, for example, is something that is very core to how anything that gets released, if it gets too chaotic, you always have ability to kill a minion, 7 attack or more.
Right.
And I don't think it's bad to have cards that effectively are eternal. Even if you look at cards that people really hate, they hate like Fireball because they hate getting hit in the face directly for damage and just killed by Freeze Mage. But Fireball existing always kind of gives this ability for Mage to have an identity. And I think some of these core cards are important. I don't think Reno is one of those cards. I think Reno comes through a phase where it's really fun to spread out your entire deck, because what ends up happening when you play a Reno deck is you're essentially playing a bad deck. But you have a few very powerful cards. It feels like Arena in a sense. But for some reason, it gets tied beautifully by the fact that Reno is such an absurdly powerful card that you can heal for 20, have an amazing amount of power on the board. So I think that Reno rotating is ultimately good for the game. I know a lot of people love the card. They really feel like it's such a strong force in the sea of aggro. But it's not like there's other cards that you can't play. If everybody loses power, then maybe Priest plays their very bad spell of Greater Healing Potion. I'm not saying it will be a good card, but that thing heals you for 12. You know, maybe Shamans play Healing Wave instead, and they can have an effective Reno replacement, even if Shaman's not playing Reno right now. There's going to be more cards in the future, so I'm not a big favor of keeping Reno in the current set, but I think they'll still be around. Kazakus is really strong, and there's also really other powerful Reno effect cards, and who knows? Like, any legendary that gets printed is effectively going into the Kazakus deck now, because that's a one-of, and if it's strong enough, it goes in those decks.
Yeah. Are there any cards that you would like to see stick around?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
It's interesting you don't have something that bubbles to your mind immediately. It sounds like you're completely okay with just like, all right, just give me a new meta. Like, I'm done with this.
I have commitment issues, Travis, I'm not sure if I want to be seeing a card forever. In fact, I would love to see more of the classic cards get rotated out. I think some of the legendaries are too oppressive. I would love to see a metagame where Ragnaros is one of the strongest cards that you have to put in any control style deck, or even Sylvanas. Even though I get that these cards are really core to how people feel about the game. You know, they open up Sylvanas from the very beginning. It's their first legendary craft. They feel like they can't let it go. I think the game ultimately becomes better for it, because if we keep hanging on to the past, the game is going to become bland. In terms of the modern day cards that would be stuck around, like I'm not exactly sure. I really like some of these hate cards that end up coming out that are really fun, but I don't really think like any staple cards are good. Hate cards, of course, sorry to back up, are cards like Destroy a Weapon or Destroy a Murloc or Destroy a Dragon. Like, these kinds of things I think are really important. So hate cards should stick around, I think, because they're very useful tools for the metagame. But I don't really think that some of these really meta-defining cards like Kazakus, Reno should stick around long term.
Yeah, and I do think hate cards kind of represent that Hearthstone identity of hate, Like when I go to the subreddit, I see so much hate on there. I feel like that really is a component of that.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Is there anything that you would like to say to any of the folks out there? Where can people find you? What's going on with you? Anything that you want to throw out there to any of the Frodan Hearthstone fans?
Yeah, so I know I've been very busy traveling, but if you want to keep up with my adventures, you can follow me at Twitter, at Frodan, or if you're on Facebook.com/DanJCho is my real name. And then whenever I'm streaming, I'm always streaming on Twitch.tv/Frodan, so check me out there if you want to catch me stream. And also, succumbing to the salt once in a while.
Yeah, very good. The hate. There we
The
go.
hate.
Yeah. They really need to make a salt card, by the way. Like, just like something that would represent that.
Yeah, maybe if Raynad wins the World Championship.
Yeah, that'd be
weird fantasy parallel universe.
or at least a card back would be sick. Just imagine like a salt shaker. Like, that would be pretty good.
Oh, on the back of the card.
Yeah.
Animated and
Yes.
I like it.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for coming in the studio. It's always great to talk a little bit about what's going on in Hearthstone and get a feel for, especially your opinions on all that stuff. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of our coverage of all things esports here at Yahoo Esports.